Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /Entitled People, where people truly believe it's all about them and who cares about others. And in today's episode, Karen parents are embarrassing their children in public. They're throwing tantrums, harassing people, taking over weddings. It's unreal. So if you ever thought your parents might have been embarrassing, well, it's nothing compared to some of these stories. So sit back, relax, and seriously, try not to cringe too hard today. Let's dive in. So this just happened the other day. I was sitting on the bus on the way to the city, and the bus stopped at a checkpoint where they changed drivers. The driver's getting his jacket when a woman who just entered the bus with her daughter pipes up. Now, this discussion happened very quickly, and it's nothing major, but it's my first entitled Karen story, and she made everyone very uncomfortable. Out of nowhere, I hear the woman scream, "Hey, you charged an adult ticket." The driver looks over at the mom and the kid confused, and he says, "Well, I can't refund it since we don't have a system for that. My apologies." And this is when Karen says, "No, but she's a kid. You can see that, right? Are you blind? Do you want to see ID or something?" Now, I have to note that although the embarrassed girl was quite skinny, she could have easily been 16 or 17. The kids' tickets are sold for 12 and younger, and she barely looked 12, so it's an understandable mistake. When the driver didn't reply, Karen continues to raise her voice to get the attention of every last person on the bus. We all hear, "Can you believe this? Well, I'm gonna have to get reimbursed for this. My daughter is a kid. Are you blind?" The driver just tells her, "I already told you there's nothing I can do." And this is when Karen says, "Can't you pay me in cash? I can't believe this. This is your mistake and you need to fix it. And don't you dare get snappy with me and stop making those faces." The driver just rolls his eyes one last time before reaching into his own pocket to get her some change. He then says to the rest of the passengers, "Have a nice day." When the driver left the bus and the mom returned to her seat, she just kept complaining to everybody who would listen about the $1.70 and saying that a person like him should be fired. Her daughter just kept her head down and she desperately searched for her headphones to keep her distracted for the rest of the bus drive. She was clearly embarrassed by her mother's actions. Yeah, as a preteen, there is nothing more mortifying than your parents causing a scene like that. And over $1.70, guys, and I do get it, it's principle, right? But mom could have handled it way better than she did. And this next OP has their mother show up to their workplace. Okay, so this happened a couple of weeks ago. So about a month ago, I got a new job at a chain grocery store. The store's 5 minutes from my house, and I generally work most weekdays on the evenings and anytime Saturday and Sunday. So that said, I'm working as a cashier, and that's when I see her in my line. Now, where I work, there's a strict policy where you can't check out family members to prevent things like favoritism, theft, or people giving out extra money from the registers, so on and so forth. So as I'm checking someone else out, I see my mom in my line, and I immediately say, "You cannot be in my line, mother." And she goes, "Shush. I already have my stuff down, so you have to check me out. Focus on your customer." I'm just like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'll just have to keep reiterating it. So my customer goes, and my mom's up next, and I tell her repeatedly, "I can't check you out because you're family." And my mom repeatedly tells me that her stuff's on the conveyor belt and that I'm her daughter, so I have to check her out. She says this multiple times. I refuse to even touch her items, and the manager knows what my mom looks like, so I don't want to get caught. I just stand there saying the same thing over and over. "I'm sorry, Mom, I can't check you out." Finally, my mom goes, "Fine then, I want to speak to your manager about you." And hearing that, I was shocked. Like, I knew my mom was petty, but she just says once again for me to get my manager. So I look my mom in the eye and I pick up the phone and I ring to customer service where my manager on duty is. And I say, hey, there's a lady that would like to speak to the manager. My manager says, okay, be there in a second. So we wait a minute and manager comes over and she's like, how can I help you, ma'am? And my mother immediately pops off. She says to my manager, this girl refuses to check me out. I already have my stuff on the conveyor and she needs to check me out, blah blah blah. The manager looks at me and says, is this your mom? I reply, yeah, that's my mother. The manager on duty says, yeah, she can't check you out because that's against store policy. However, I can check you out myself. The manager proceeds to log me out of my register and log herself in and then check my mother out. The entire time, I kid you not, my mother's going, well, she's my daughter. Why isn't she allowed to do this? This is so rude. I can't believe this. And what kind of stupid store policy is this? Blah, blah, blah. And I was just about to die of embarrassment. Eventually, my mother leaves and manager goes back to customer service. And it would have been fine, but of course, many people on my shift overheard it and they wouldn't stop talking about it. They were all saying stuff like, I can't believe Jessica's mother made her call the manager. Never have I ever wanted to quit so badly. Yeah, the only thing worse than mom showing up to your workplace is mom showing up, not respecting policies, and then yelling at your boss that she's right. Like, imagine being the new worker and your mom does something like that. Like, mom, this is my livelihood. You gotta go home. And while we're on the topic of moms yelling at people, oh boy, this next one, guys. So yesterday was one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. Apparently, my mother is one of those ladies. We were in the store looking for sports pants. We found a good pair costing $30. These pants didn't have a price tag on them, but they were the only ones my size, and all the other sizes cost $30. So my mom asked an actual employee if we need to bring a tagged pants to the checkout. The employee says, no, that's fine. They'll do it manually at the checkout. So we get to the checkout and the till says $40. I wanted to politely say, excuse me, but I believe this was a mistake. The pants were $30, I believe. However, right before I could even say anything, my mother starts yelling saying, no, no, no. That is not the right price. It's $30. Are you effing trying to scam us? The lady behind the till didn't handle this well, but I don't blame her. It's not every day that some psycho customer screams at you. She tells my mom, well, I'll get some tagged pants to check the price. And right at this point, my mom starts yelling at who she thought was the guy from downstairs, who told us we didn't need to bring the tagged pants, but actually, it was another shopper. My mom screams at him saying, hey, you told us we didn't need to bring those pants. Now tell her it was $30. I just did my best to calm my mother down, and right about now, I didn't realize the guy she was talking to was not an employee. The guy meanwhile starts stuttering something like, I don't know, I've never said anything like that to you. And cue my mom losing it. She screams at him saying, why are you lying? I just spoke to you. Well, go pick up some pants from downstairs to show it to her. This is unacceptable, blah blah blah. Meanwhile, deeply ashamed, I say to my mom, Mom, quiet down, I'll go get the pants and the mistake is fixed. Mistakes happen, let me fix this. I look at the guy she yelled at to apologize, and this is when I realize that the guy's wearing a red sweater, not a red polo. Thus, he's not an employee. Realizing my mom just yelled at some complete random stranger who she thought was a worker turned my face even more red than the man's red sweater. I quickly apologize and I pull my mother downstairs to get tagged pants. We get to the till, and the lady behind the till has to check the numbers on the pants to see if they're the same. My mother's getting impatient and she's yelling more and more. I try to shush her, so I tell her that I'll fix it and I'll meet her in the next store. She goes outside to have a smoke and I check out, and yes, the pants were $30 and I apologize to the checkout lady. The lady smiles at me and she says, "Did you ever work in retail?" I told her I did, and she gave me this golden quote. She says, "I'm sure you've already paid for your mother's sins here," and she gave me a wink. We smiled and I left. Afterwards, my mom and I had a discussion about what happened. It was long and full of disagreements, but this part still haunts my mind. I say to her, "So by the way, the guy you yelled at, he wasn't the guy we spoke to originally. The guy was a random stranger. He had a red sweater on, not a red polo." And this is when my mom says, "Well, that idiot shouldn't have worn a red sweater while shopping there then." And at this point, I just gave up. I hope you can all forgive me for having a mother like this. And by the way, my mother and I usually have a great relationship, and this really surprised me about her. Yet another situation where there's no hole deep enough that you could crawl into to get away from that embarrassment. And the fact that mom was like, "Well, he shouldn't have been wearing a red shirt to begin with. He's an idiot." Like, holy moly, how do you win against that? And be honest, who's still showing your face in that store after that? And it only gets worse from here. This next OP's mom thought she had the power to control a stranger. So I was about 13 when this happened, and I still randomly think about it sometimes because it was really embarrassing. The day this happened, we were at the airport because we were flying to visit my grandparents. The flights had been delayed and everyone was tired. We end up eating at one of those airport restaurants. Now, my mom has one rule that she treats like it's a law. No cell phones at the table, ever. Which, to be fair, is not a bad rule. She prefers that everyone talk to each other while eating, not just stare at their own phones. And the problem was my mom didn't think it only applied to our family. She acted like it should apply to everyone on Earth. As soon as we sat down, my little sister points across the restaurant and she says, "Mom, that lady's on her phone." I didn't even look, I already knew where this was going. My mom answered loud enough for half the restaurant to hear, and she says, "Yes, and she shouldn't be. That's very rude." The whole time, I'm thinking, please don't. Please just let this go. And then I hear the chair scrape. My mom actually leans towards the stranger, and she says to her, "Hey, so we have a rule that no cell phones are allowed at the table. I'm trying to teach my children that, so if you don't mind, could you put away your phone while eating?" The lady looked confused for a second, and then she smiles politely and she says, "Well, actually, we have the same rule, but since I'm eating alone, I'm not being rude to anyone." Now, normal people would have just laughed and moved on, but not my mom. My mom doubles down and says, "Well, obviously, you have a family, so you know how important rules are. I would appreciate it if you just put your phone away." My dad just quietly slides the menu towards my mom, and he says, "Let's just order." Of course, mom ignores him. And this is when my 6-year-old sister joined in, and she says, "Yeah, my brother can't have his phone at the table, so you can't either." The woman just smiled again, and she says to my sister, "The nice thing about being a grown-up is I can do whatever I want." My mom just lets out the loudest, most dramatic sigh I've ever heard. And then she flags down our waiter and she says, "Yeah, I'm gonna need another table." And the poor waiter looked completely confused. The waiter asked, "Is something wrong?" My mom then points at the woman and she says she's refusing to put her phone away. The waiter just says, "Okay." And seriously, I've never seen somebody look so professionally uncomfortable. After a painfully long silence, the waiter just says, "Yeah, I can move your table." The waiter had to put all of our drinks onto a tray, and our family moved across the restaurant because my mom couldn't handle seeing another adult use a phone. As we walked past, I avoid looking at the woman because I was so embarrassed. The woman stayed exactly where she was. She ate her meal in peace, and she just kept scrolling on her phone. And that's how it should be. Like, I love how the stranger didn't back down, and she was like, the best thing about being a grown-up is we don't have to listen to other grown-ups. And seriously, you know it's bad when kids recognize that their parents can do better. Like the next two stories. Okay, so last year, me and my boyfriend went swimming to a lake on a really hot day, and there was a pizza place like a 5-minute walk from the lake. So we decided to go get something to eat after we took a dip, and that pizza place had really good AC. We get to the pizzeria, sit down, and order the food and wait. We were both chatting about random stuff while we waited, and that's when a woman with her son, who's probably 12 or 13 years old, sat down at the table behind us. And here comes the fun part. Since it was an extremely hot day, we were wearing summery stuff, of course. I wore flip-flops, shorts, and a t-shirt, while my boyfriend wore a t-shirt, shorts, and sneakers. Also, when I was little, I had to get surgery due to an accident, and that left me with some nasty scars on my legs. And this is when Karen decides to step in, and she says, "Do you always go out like this? You should cover up." I of course turn around and I say, "Pardon?" The woman goes on to say, "You should cover up. I don't want my son to see those scars on your legs. Do you have a towel or something?" I respond, "I'm sorry, but I don't really care about my scars, and if people don't like them, they shouldn't look at them." My boyfriend was listening to our little chat, and he decides to step in as well, telling the Karen, "If you could stop bothering us, that would be great." Meanwhile, her son's focused on his phone, not even paying attention to us or his mother. And that's when Karen says loudly, "Excuse me." My boyfriend again says, "If you could leave us alone, we would appreciate it." The Karen wasn't having it, and she gets mad. And right about now, every other customer in the place could hear her, and they start watching us. Her kid notices mom get up from her chair and begin yelling at us some more, and the kid starts rolling his eyes like this wasn't the first time this has happened. The manager comes in and starts asking questions like, "What's going on here?" And that's when Karen says, "I asked her to cover up and she won't. She needs to learn how to respect people." And hearing that, me and my boyfriend's jaw just dropped. We never even looked at her or said anything to her that would have even offended her this much. This is when her kid decides to say, "Mom, stop." And Karen says, "You stay quiet." At this point, the manager asks her to please leave, and Karen says, "I'm not leaving." The manager then says, "I'm calling the police then." She then starts screaming at her kid to leave with her, while the kid just starts apologizing to us. The kid actually said to us, "Sorry about my mom, she's always like this. She's actually banned from a lot of restaurants." We just felt so bad for the kid because it's not even his fault. We just say it's fine and he shouldn't be worried about it. The kid thanks us and leaves the store. The manager offered us a free meal as an apology for what happened. We get our pizza and drinks, have a good laugh, and move on. We still laugh about it to this day. So I have to share this story because it's too ridiculous not to. I went to the local outlet mall to treat myself to some new shoes. I was sitting on the bench, putting my shoes back on after trying some new pairs on. And that's when I hear some ruckus and notice this family. It's a parent and 3 kids walking by. The kids were acting out and being loud. They had taken the metal poles that staff used to get the shoes from the higher shelves, and they're trying to hit and poke their parents with them. The mom was laughing about it and egging them on. Typical boys will be boys stuff. As I'm bending over to adjust my sandal, one of the kids starts swinging the pole and it nearly hit me in the face. Now, I've worked with kids with severe behavioral issues for years, so I was a little shaken, but I knew how to respond. I quietly but firmly said, "Excuse me," to the kid, so he would get that thing out of my face. The kid barely blinked and walked away. And this is when the mother starts shouting at me. I'm normally not the type to stereotype based on appearance, but she was the typical boy mom that you see on social media. Face full of filler, dirty hair in a messy bun, orange tan, all that stuff. She then began screaming that her son wasn't even near me, and that her kids weren't doing anything. I pointed out that her kid nearly hit me in the face with a metal pole. She then turns to her kid and she starts baby talking him. She says to him, "You did nothing wrong, sweetie. This bad woman, she's making it all up." She then turns to me and she screamed that I could have moved out of the way. I just rolled my eyes at the absurdity and I start gathering my stuff to pay. And she continues to shout things like, "Get out, move along, you should have moved." I just decided that there was no point in being polite. So I calmly said to her, "And perhaps you should be a better parent and watch your kids." She just continued to shout at me as I walked away. As I was waiting to pay, I see her lurking by the door with her 300-pound stroller glaring at me, with her teenage daughter beside her. And you could tell that this kid wanted to die of embarrassment. I just started laughing like she's gonna beat me down in a shoe store in broad daylight. That must have pissed her off, so she walked away. I assumed she was gone, but when I left the store, her creepy husband was standing outside and the guy was staring me down. He actually followed me around the mall for a minute, but I eventually lost him. As I mentioned earlier, I work with kids with severe behavior issues, including in a juvenile justice setting. From what I understand, it's become exponentially worse over the years. Going out in public used to be enjoyable, but I feel like people not supervising their kids is starting to become a broader societal issue. It felt so freeing to finally call out crappy parenting. Here's some backstory. I was previously married to a man, and I came out 2 years in. Things ended as mutually as possible, but we don't talk. We've been divorced for 5 years now. My stepmother apparently never got over it. She keeps a huge framed picture of us dressed up in the living room. And the thing is, I've asked her to take it down so many times. In a heated argument, it got knocked off the wall and broke, and she charged me for the repair, even though she hit it while trying to point at it. Well, fast forward, I find a wonderful girlfriend about 2 years ago. She's intelligent, funny, and quirky cute. She begged me for months to meet my parents. We had been dating for a little over a year, and she had met all of my closest friends and family, but she wanted to meet the parents. I explained my past with my stepmother and her tendencies. She understood, and she stopped asking. Well, long story short, my stepmother shows up one day, and she invited us in person for dinner, and I felt obligated to go. When my girlfriend and I arrived, the night went as normal as possible, but then my girlfriend brings up the picture of my ex and I. She says, "It's a good picture. Where was this at?" Enter my stepmother. She then rambles on and on and on how happy we were together and how I was so much more fit back then. And it's a shame things didn't work out for him. She literally spent 20 minutes talking about how I should have stayed with my ex, how she doesn't understand why I even left. It was unbearable. I just interrupted and I said, "It's late, we have to go." Girlfriend and I gather our things, and as we're packing up, stepmother says, "Oh, she always gets so upset about it. I don't know why. It's a part of your past, and you need to accept that." My girlfriend and I broke up for her to study in another state, and every girl I date now, I'm scared to bring over because stepmom still has that picture up to this day, and she still mentions it. It's such an awkward, unbearable, and embarrassing thing to do to your stepdaughter. And my dad won't help either. He never gets involved with the topic of removing it, and I hate that I can't convince her. And I hate even more that she rubs it in my face. I wish that picture would just disappear. Honestly, stepmom needs to let that go because it's getting creepy more than anything that she forever has OP and her ex's picture on the wall. And the fact that she brings it up all the time to the new person that OP's seeing, oh my goodness. Like, I'm surprised OP hasn't smashed that picture. In my opinion, I think OP's gotta give her an ultimatum or something. If you can't respect me and my wishes, then you'll never see me again. So as a kid, I would often be working at my dad's workplace. He was an off-premise caterer and event planner, and he would often be hired to put together lavish wedding parties. And I'm talking huge feasts, cheese and fruit tables 40 feet long, lots of wine, and sometimes multiple pigs for both an afternoon and an evening roast. Basically lots of fancy people wanting fancy parties, and they're paying a ton of money and expecting the world to revolve around them. One event in particular stood out because when the bride-to-be and her mother came in to go over details, they had some rather heated disagreements over some really stupid stuff. My dad would just sit there quietly, not taking sides, and patiently wait for people to work out the differences, but this one argument came to an interesting and final conclusion. The mother of the bride was screaming about the specific shade the ribbons and icing trim on the cake should be. Up until that point, she had proven herself incapable of letting her daughter have the final say in anything. From the menu to plate garnishes to the time the meal was to start, the mom was insisting that she should have her way on everything. The daughter was gritting her teeth and grinding through it, but when her mother started to fuss about the exact shade of off-light green, no, that's too light, no, that's too dark, the bride finally snapped. She loudly and firmly stated, "Mother, you're embarrassing me and ruining my day. If you don't knock it off right this instant, I'm going to disinvite you from the wedding. This is my day and the decisions will be mine." She then turns to my dad and she looked him squarely in the eyes and she said, "I will be signing your check. You work for me. Nothing's decided until I say so. If my mother tries to plan or change anything, you are to call me immediately. I don't expect you'll have any problems with that." My dad simply said, "Not at all," and they got back to planning the wedding. Yeah, can't help but to wonder how that wedding day went. Hopefully the mom wasn't disinvited. And if she did show up, let's hope it wasn't in a white wedding dress, like what this OP experienced. They say, "So I was at a wedding today that was a mess from the word go. The bride was beautiful, it was hot as hell, and yet she was still perfect. Her groom was 35 minutes late to the wedding venue, but that didn't bother her. Their kids kept talking and walking around, and one 3-year-old almost toppled into the pond. The bride was graceful, all smiles." It was mentioned that this was an unplugged wedding, but her dad and his mom both stood up and they took photos interrupting the ceremony. The bride just laughed it off and carried on. It appeared that this was gonna be a perfect day, and that's when she saw her stepmom. This 70-something lady was wearing a white gown. And seriously, who does that stuff? I was appalled by it, and I even texted my husband, who wasn't there to tell him. The bride refused to even talk to the lady, and that's when the entitled mother made a huge deal saying, "I can't believe my daughter won't talk to me today. It breaks my heart." The bride was epic though. She finally looked at the 70-year-old baby and said, "My 3-year-old knows that you don't make scenes like that in public without repercussions." The entitled woman had the nerve to act shocked, and she said, "I don't know what you mean." And that's when the beautiful bride just said, "You know full well that you don't wear white to a wedding. You've embarrassed me enough, so sit down, shut up, or leave." And let me tell you, I was impressed. It's not as climactic as some, but it was amazing in person. I just love how the bride handled everything so well and was like, nothing is gonna ruin my day. But seriously, I can never understand the thought process of some people. Like, are some people that darn entitled that they have to make wedding days all about them? Like, yes, you're getting attention, Karen, but nobody's gonna think well of you. Like, you'll forever be known as the person who had to try and upstage the bride. Like, is the negative attention really worth it in the end? Or do some people not even care as long as they get attention? But that's r/entitled people for you guys, where people do the most ridiculous things. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy, crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/petty revenge episode, where Karens are messing with the wrong people and they're getting taught lessons they won't ever forget. It's such a wild episode, so go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.